may we start by closing our eyes for a few seconds, not for any reason or for any objective, counting breaths and so on, none of that. Just relaxing, taking a quick break before we enter into a small conversation together. A break from our day or our evening, depending on your time zone, and everything included in our day. Because we don't want to rush. No, we don't want to rush into another conversation or another part of our day. We want to end our day, as it were. We don't want to escape from our day, we want to be free from our day. Escaping our day and being free from our day are two very, very different things. Escaping our daily responsibilities, paying the bills, rushing and toiling away. Escaping from all of that is one thing. Wanting entertainment, away from that is one thing. But being free from that is something completely different. And we're not saying that by closing our eyes we're going to be instantly free from that, from all of that. We're not talking about anything spiritual or psychological, for the moment at least, but rather something very basic and simple, something very physical, if you like, which is closing our eyes, breaking our normal, vision of things around us. And we can do this at the beginning of our conversation, we can do this during our conversation for a few seconds, and we can end also our conversation with it. But I think it's also good that after we finish our conversation and you go about your day and I go about my day, it's rather good to remember to close one's eyes for a few seconds. Not only when things become too much, but rather regularly, if it's possible. And again, we're not following any system, we're not following any meditative technique or anything like that. The other day I was thinking about the age, the times that we live in presently, all of us, wherever we may be living on this beautiful planet, we're impacted by the society we live in. And when the impact is so global, so vast, one can call it, a different age altogether. But of course we're talking about a societal age. We're not talking about any planetary age or galactic age or anything like that, solar age, etc. But rather a societal age. I think if one were to put a word on the age we live in, it would probably be the information age, the age of information. I think information is taking a very dominant part of our lives. Much more than ever, probably. It's all about information, isn't it, these days? The Internet of Things, computers, smartphones, social media, content creation, gaming, and even our day-to-day tasks are relying much more than ever on information, governed much more by information. And this information, while probably not invented today, for information has been there for centuries, since the dawn of humanity, has taken a very big or important turn over the last 100 years, or 150 years, or 200 years, and especially over the last few decades, in the last few years, information has definitely taken a very important turn. Not only do we rely on information for convenience and for practicality and to do good in this world and to have better relationships or good relationships, but unfortunately we also use or exploit information for destructive things, don't we? Whether that be in our relationships, in our habits, in wasting our time, and how we waste our time at an individual level, at a household level, at a community level. And also, we can easily see how nations and groups are exploiting information to destroy other groups and other nations. And I will not go into that subject for the time being. I think it's very, very clear. And this is our relationship to information. In a nutshell, information can be used to carry out a very basic task, washing, our clothes, using, Google Maps or some navigation system to go from point A to point B. That is utilizing information for convenience. But also, when we end up spending most of our day on our smartphones, just going through and scrolling through endless videos and entertainment and meaningless content, meaningless information, that is obviously, quite another thing. Earlier today, I saw a small video, one of these reels, that said pineapple on pizza, yes or no. I was inviting people to engage on this content, etc. And people were engaging on this content. You had infinite number of comments and interactions. And this is just one example, but I'm going to use this example. Is it really important whether we put pineapple on our pizza or not? Especially when there is so much struggle around us, inside of us, inside our households, with our neighbors, in the nations close to us or far away from us, in the starvation that's happening, the poverty that's happening, the murder, the killing, the displacement of people. Is it really important whether we put pineapples on our pizzas or not? Is it really important? Is information really important? In the midst of all of this, is information really important? How much information do we need? And is it information that we need to change all of this? Is it information? What information or what additional information do we need to stop all of this around us, within us? I don't think it's about information. In fact, I think information is being used to distract us from doing something important, something real, to change all this, to stop all this, starting with ourselves. This is not merely a call for activism, for joining another cause. This is not merely an invitation for you to put down your phones and jump on some bandwagon and chase one of these, unlimited causes out there. It's much more than that, what we're talking about, hopefully. And from this viewpoint or vantage point, information really has a very limited place. I think it ought to be very easy and simple to say, okay, I don't need any more information on anything really. I have enough information on what constitutes, proper day-to-day living, how much exercising is needed, what kind of foods I need to eat, what kind of nutrients I need to ensure, that I'm consuming on a daily basis. I have enough information to tell me, what kind of work or career I need to have. What kind of education I need to provide for my children. I think we have enough information already. Even before the turn of the, information age. And I think it's very simple and also very important to say, let me put all of this aside and let me do something real. Do something real. Because I think whether by design or by chance, information is dividing us. It's dividing not only our cooperation, but also the cooperation among us as human beings, as a global society, global community, but also dividing and dissipating our own energies through distraction, through entertainment, etc., so on and so forth. You see, the day is very limited, and the number of hours in a day are limited. They're not infinite. And therefore, the number of years in our lifetimes is also not infinite. This is very basic, of course. But I think it's very important to realize too that we can easily waste years, much more than ever, We can easily waste years, decades even now, chasing nothing, merely spinning information, and going around in circles, and just being infinitely distracted and entertained. And I think it's very powerful to put all of that aside if it is possible, because I think it's much more difficult than it's much more difficult to say it than to actually live it or do it. Sorry, it's much easier to say it than to actually do it. But I think it's very possible. I think it's very important. I think it's very urgent. Otherwise, we're leaving behind a terrible society for our children and for the next generation, and for us even, for ourselves even. These are really basic things. They don't need any formula. They don't need any system or method on how to, bring such a thing about, on how to put information in its rightful place and actually do something with our lives in this life, in this society, in this beautiful world. I don't think any technique is needed. It's really these basic things that we ought to look at and have the courage to look at in the age of information, in the age of pressure. Information is really essentially a form of pressure. Sure, it is a form of entertainment and distraction, but essentially it is pressuring us to stop observing. That's what it's doing, essentially. It's a form of pressure, and this pressure is coming at us from a 360-degree angle, from everywhere, from every side, from almost everybody around us, whether outside of our household or inside of our household. It's coming from everywhere. Even our own brains are demanding more information now because of how much we're used to it and because of the pressure that has been internalized. It's not easy to put all this pressure aside, but also it doesn't require a method. Don't follow anybody who tells you, I have a way of breaking away from this. I have a way of how you can lead a better life. I have a way of how I can, of how we can all live a more prosperous life. Don't follow any of that. That is really meaningless. Have you ever given this a thought? You probably have. But have you ever followed this through? That when someone comes along and tells you, or when you go out there and look for someone or some idea concerning how to live better, how to be more prosperous, how to have more money, how to struggle less. Have you ever followed this through? Follow this through from your own living and from the living or the life of others. Have you ever observed it thoroughly, right to the end? If you have, what have you found out? Aren't we really self-centered? Isn't this approach essentially self-centeredness in itself, which means selfishness? It's really simple. everyone, or almost everyone, is out there in this world, in this society, looking out for their own self-interest, at best for their own group interest, including, one's family. This is really the society we live in, or the society we have brought about. We are a bunch of people, each one of us isolated from the other, each group isolated from the other, looking out for its own self-interest, its own group interest. And each group is following a specific method, whether that method is traditional, whether that method is modern, whether that method is ancient, whether that method is new age. Some of us are following a non-path path. And this is the relationship that we have amongst each other, or the lack of relationship thereof. And information, and all of this is happening in the backdrop of much more information than ever coming onto us as a form of pressure, separating us much more than ever, and dissipating our individual energy much more than ever. I think it's important to be very careful from all of this, and not merely, follow small changes here and there, by setting aside the phone for a certain number of hours a day. I think that is of course important, or that is good, but these are really small fixes. I think the issue is very big, and I think we need to address these big, issues by first looking at the entirety of the picture and having the courage to call it as it is, call a spade, not necessarily to anyone around us, but to ourselves, to realize this quickly, swiftly, without hesitation, but also without the need to express it. This is a very intimate thing that needs to be grasped instantly, much like anything else. And without even, the need to express it in words, but really out of urgency and necessity for survival. Because I think we may be, developing more materially, but spiritually, and I'm using this word spiritually in a very careful manner, I think we're degrading spiritually. When we talk about spiritually, what I mean by this word is our spirits. When they say this person is high in spirit, I think that is what spirituality is. To be high in spirit. Also, another word for spirituality is inspired, inspiration. You see, spirituality, inspiration, and to have high spirit are really one thing. Now we have divided them, and we have made a big thing out of each one of them, and each one now is in different directions. Spirituality now is an industry in itself. Being inspired is something, and then to have high spirit is something else. And I think really they're one and the same thing. It's really essentially about having high spirits, or high spirit, waking up in the morning with a high spirit, leading your day with a high spirit, and ending your day in high spirit. Now this, I think, also includes the ups and the downs. Careful here, I'm not saying that we should be positive. I'm not saying that we should always, escape through positivity or positive psychology. But I think even when one is sad, I think it is possible to be sad in high spirit. I think it's rather beautiful to be sad sometimes if one is sad, and this is no invitation for you to go and be sad now, but if one is sad, and I think it is inevitable for each one of us to be sad at some point, I think it's very important to, if you're gonna be sad, or if you are sad, to be sad in high spirit. I think that's beautiful and it's very powerful, and I don't think we've ever done this before, to be sad in high spirit. And I think we can definitely talk about this much more later on. Back to the meaning of spirituality. Can we live in high spirit, with high spirits consistently? You see, that's the beauty, is to live in high spirit not only momentarily or on a temporary basis as a result of some pill, or as a result of some talk, or as a result of some, script or some mantra. Because these things might work, and they will work for a short period of time. But they'll also come with side effects, so it's not only that they're temporary. Notice that they always come with negative side effects. You take a pill, you're gonna feel better for a short period of time, but also it's causing you more harm than good. And I think the same applies to scripts, and I think the same applies to any other method, or even talk. Because to be very honest with you, I think, and I don't know if you've realized this or you are observing this on a day-to-day basis, but most of the talks out there and in here or wherever are not only useless, but they're also self-centered. The main objective behind most of the talks that we listen to and hear, the main objective is how to bring consistent income to the speaker or to the group behind it, or even to the audience. Well, the audience comes second, right? And that's really what it's mostly about. And they'll tell you anything, and you're ready to hear anything as long as it ensures, more income. Be very careful. So although these things can put your spirits on a higher platform temporarily, is that enough? And are you satisfied to just have temporary high spirits? Or are you merely concerned with that temporary high spirit and then going back to take another pill or another talk, and so they have you in that loop? Don't you want to break free from that loop? Don't you want to break free from that dependency? Don't you want to be completely independent spiritually? Don't you want to, or don't you long for having consistent high spirits completely independently from anyone or anything? That's what we're trying to talk about. That's what we'd like to find out together during our talks. Because I think if it's possible to do that, then I think society can have a very different direction and be in a very different state than it is today, spiritually speaking, and even materially speaking. And materially doesn't necessarily mean money. But today, in our present society, it's all about money, isn't it? I mean, education. If you have money, then you can go and get good academic education, not any other form of education. So it's really money that governs the world, the society we live in today. But I think if it's possible to bring about high spirits consistently within oneself, completely independently from anybody or anything, then society, then there's a chance and a possibility for society to have a very different path. And then, it's possible for us to give our children a better, society, a better legacy. And so we're going to have these conversations more and more. We're going to try to keep them brief for the time being, and then hopefully discuss together these important matters.